Hi, everyone. I'm Rich Berliner. I'm here today with Andrew Weakland, who is Senior Vice President at WP Carey, and this is Digital Locations. Andrew, we had a chance to spend some time together in New Orleans recently, but you are a young guy in a big position at a prestigious company. Well, tell us a little bit about how you got here, what your background is, and how you made it
Sure.
to this level.
Sure. Thanks, Rich. I may not be as young as I look, but I've been WP Carey now for, geez, gotta do some math, going on 17 years, actually 17 years as of last month. And I started the firm, as an intern through their summer internship program. So my history of WP Carey goes back to the very beginning of my career. And, commercial real estate is a very interesting space. So I come from the commercial real estate side. So for those of you on the wireless side, which we'll get into, a bit different in how we function and really relationship based world. But my background's been finance and economics. I originally worked in finance for quite a while, had a brief stint in accounting even. And then I actually left and came back. I had an entrepreneurial streak, started a few companies, which all ultimately did not pan out. And back I came to commercial real estate. But I'm relatively new to technology. I think that kind of inflects on my approach to running an enterprise technology team. We are lucky in that we have a very digitally native and savvy front office, which allows us in technology to not be a traditional legacy IT shop worried only about, databases and infrastructure and change management, things like that, and can be very progressive when it comes to deploying new SaaS technology, new cloud, et cetera. Mostly, I think, because of the long history of our company and kind of a data first perspective we've had before we even had an IT department, right? WP Carey's been around over 50 years. Bill Carey invented the sale leaseback and then rode that to great success, building out his private companies, which ultimately became public over the years. And we've been listed for 25 years now on the New York Stock Exchange. So it kind of goes one and the same, right? You hit your horse or you hit your buggy to the right horse at the right time, that can take you very far. But I think WP Carey as an organization excels in innovation, excels in modernizing and making their processes as efficient and intelligent as possible. And becoming a technologist goes hand in hand with that, right? I realized that the gap was no longer our processes, the gap was no longer our human resources, our talent. The gap was our technology, and technology has not been a focus of commercial real estate, at least until very recently. So I pivoted into that opportunity when it arose and kind of rode that wave, if you will. But I think it all goes back to being at the right organization, right? You could be an organization that doesn't value your talent, doesn't value technology, you're not going to go far. So that's what I thank for my success. But ultimately, I think my success is just part of a small part of a much larger story at Carey. And I mean, if you look at the company's track record and our years as a public company and in our growth and our we've never missed a dividend increase, things like that. It goes to show you that it is all part of being on the right team as well. So with that said, Rich, bring me back down to earth here. What do you want to know about how commercial landlords look at this technology?
Well, that's great. So, a couple of things. One is you and I had a long discussion at the show about your thoughts on in building and wireless, and I caught something you put on LinkedIn about going to the keynote speech, and I don't know who the keynote speaker was that you were referring to. You might mention that, but that you had the opposite opinion as the keynote speaker. So tell us
Yeah.
about what your thoughts are about the space and what you heard at the show that was an opposite of your discussion.
Yeah, no, I do call them out on LinkedIn. So if you want to see the inside the gossip there, by all means, feel free to follow it and check that out. But so the speaker was specifically talking about Wi-Fi, as the kind of baseline connectivity and why it's going to remain the leader in the space and why it's the right play for your buildings as a landlord. And we are at the very top of the capital stack, right? So WP Carey, we're investors first, right? We don't really operate properties. We have to deploy. People think of commercial landlords, unfortunately, not to. I'll come back to your question, but they think of it as the landlord they had when they were growing up, and like they had to pay them rent on time and bother them when the washing machine broke in the apartment building, right? That's not what commercial landlords are. Right? Commercial landlords are investors first. Our goal is to deploy large amounts of capital, right? So we're looking for ways to generate returns for our investors via deploying capital into commercial real estate. And that's the way we think about these things, right? So when you're talking about, Wi-Fi as the future, Wi-Fi is not a thing we can deploy serious capital in. it's not going to make or break large decisions around building a building, leasing a building, understanding the tenants of a building, right? So when they're saying, "Oh, don't worry about it, Wi-Fi will solve all your problems. We'll figure out the security and the scalability later," it just didn't ring true to me at all, right? Wi-Fi is a data technology. It's not value add. It's not something we want to be investing in proactively. It's not going to differentiate us from other landlords. It's just not something we can sell at the level we're trying to sell it at, right? And that's actually a theme that goes across the in-building, especially in-building wireless. Very few of these technologies are actionable. They work. They seem promising. They're very exciting. Specifically like the 5G and the CBRS and all this stuff. It sounds like it could be a game changer, but when it comes time to actually execute at scale, very few people are able to live successfully. And it's ironic because, commercial real estate really hasn't changed that much, right? It's very hard to turn a pile of dirt in a vacant lot into a successful building, right? We've been doing it throughout human history. We find a way to finance it, get the talent, get the contractors, get the materials, build the building, and then rent it out or operate it, right?
Don't forget zoning.
Well, that could depend where you live, but yes, that can also be quite a challenge. But, ironically, it seems like the Wi-Fi or the wireless community still looks at it as strictly a technology challenge, when it's a lot more than that. Honestly, from what I've seen and what I've been demoed and what I've talked to people, the technology is solved. It works. People know if you mount a tower, what you get out of it. People know how to mount the towers. People know what each kind of technology can do, how it can drive value at the edge, right, in your buildings. But the execution is lagging way behind. And to give you a corollary, and actually a newer product, really, it's been around for about the same amount of time, but in terms of its ramp up, is look at solar. So if you work in in-building wireless, look at the solar industry, right? Solar panels have been around as long as I've been alive and longer in some form, right? But only now in the last 5 years they really ramped up at scale commercially. And the question is, well, what changed? And sure, there have been government subsidies. There's been cheaper materials coming in from overseas. There's been finally a talent shortage is starting to finally be addressed. But the key difference from where I sit and representing a commercial landlord is solar is easy to invest in, right? It's very easy to take a large solar product and turn it into a slideshow or an Excel model to say, we're going to put in out X dollars and get out Y return, right? That has not been solved for the in-building technologies, even though in-building technologies are generally cheaper and less capital intensive. And frankly, depending on, where you sit, more impactful to your bottom line in terms of, getting the right tenants in place or really changing the capabilities of an asset. It's just not easy to do that. There's no kind of centralized set of vendors that can provide you a scalable solution across different geographies and across different technologies. I mean, even at the show, I was going from booth to booth saying, all right, hell or high water, I'm going to figure out a way to put some 5G towers on my buildings and rent it out, right? And I'm going around saying, okay, this person's got to do the wiring. This person's got to do the software. This person's got to build the tower. Literally, there's no one-stop shop to say, I want to deploy $100 million to retrofit 15 assets, right? How are we going to make that happen? You can do that with building new buildings. Obviously, there are developers and contractors that build things all the time. You can now do that with solar. And that's the model I'd love to see in building wireless go, is a one-stop solution saying, I'm talking, we have tens of millions of square feet that are potential candidates for these technologies. We need some expertise that can help us actually convert, our very simple dollars into very actionable real world outcomes. And that's where I'm really hoping the market can go, is whether it's through consolidation, whether it's through partnerships, whatever the mechanism may be, for us to really deploy capital, it's going to be a lot easier, a lot more turnkey. We are not in the business of managing, herding cats to make a small deal happen. Because at the end of the day, these are relatively small deals for us, right? We go out and buy arm's length, 7-8 figure projects all the time. This is obviously much smaller than that for a single site, but we still think it's valuable. We think it's a good way to deploy capital. We want our tenants to have really the best experience they can. And the reality is these technologies are incredible, right? Having full connectivity that you control anywhere in your building is a game changer in terms of quality of use of that building. And we're looking at, extreme headwinds in the office space from COVID and return to work. We're looking at tons of supply constraints in the industrial side. I mean, there's supply constraints globally with, what's happened in the last few years in the markets. And there's also, financing constraints as well. But we think that, at the end of the day, these technologies do make a difference. I personally think that as well. I'm in a brand new building right now, sitting talking to you. They topped out in 2018. We don't have good 5G signal in Manhattan. So it's clearly a solution. It's clearly a problem that has a solution, but it's not one we've seen companies execute on. So that's where my take is, and that was my big takeaway from the show, is that I thought I was missing something. I thought, man, WP Carey's falling behind. There's got to be a better way to get these technologies deployed and scaled. But I found, frankly, that I'm in the same boat as everybody else. We're all kind of waiting around for a solution, and whoever moves first is going to make a killing, in my opinion.
Yeah. So you've hit on an interesting point. Again, the ability to deploy capital for return. And so one of the near neighbor businesses that you didn't exactly hit on, but you inferred, was the tower business. So the tower business is that take a huge pile of capital and deploy in a big way to house the equipment for wireless, whether it's outdoor or rooftop. But at the end of the day, the in-building piece has a similar kind of model, but nobody's quite hit on it as a specific, here, let me do everything for you. We call it in the industry the 3PO, third party operator model. Right. And I know you did get exposed to that a little bit at the show. Well, do you see that as viable?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So the tower market is very similar. We looked at cell phone tower deals. It's not the right fit for us because the reason why is we don't know enough about running a cell phone tower to underwrite the business successfully, I would think. Right? It's a very unique use case. It's very technology dependent. We're not controlling technology. And that's true for most commercial landlords. We're lucky that we diverse in incredibly broad types of asset classes. Most commercial landlords don't, right? They're an office landlord. They're a multifamily landlord. They know their market. They know their region. They know their asset class. And think about them more so than us, especially. So they're not the right people to manage a capital intensive investment in a cell phone tower, but they are the exact right people you'd be selling to manage a capital intensive investment in a building. Because say you run 100 apartment buildings in South Florida, you know your tenants, you know what they want, you know what drives leasing, whether it be renewals or signing up, leasing out new buildings. They can easily, I would think, help you make the case on how these technologies can be modernized. Now, having a modern and connected building, improving the quality of tenant experience, can drive returns for that investment if they know what it costs, if they know what it takes to execute, if they understand how the technology is going to work for the years to come. That's another big thing I didn't really mention, but the fear in a lot of these things is, well, what if the next big thing wipes us out, right? What if we're Blockbuster and then Netflix comes along? So that is something that obviously is going to have to be always maintained, is the fear of who you're selling to and what they know about your technology. You have to kind of break that down if you can. But that's where the connection can be made, right? Because obviously it's very expensive to invest in a cell phone tower, and you have to know it very well. But commercial landlords already know how to run commercial real estate, right? You don't have to teach them anything they don't already know. All you have to do is provide them the inputs to their Excel model. Like, let's be honest. If you can put the right inputs to the Excel model, I'm going to deliver Y capabilities at X cost. They can then, with the right training and understanding of how that affects tenant experience, they can help you, sell that to them in a way. Because you all have the same goal. Like, really, at the end of the day, you want to sell your product into the building. They want to turn that product into returns. They want to finance that, essentially, is what they're doing. And I think it's not that difficult to wrap your mind around. When you see these technologies work in real life, the value is pretty obvious to anyone that's got a cell phone in their pocket, which is everybody, or whether it be even the high-end stuff, the smart glass, the security systems, the IoT. It's really easy to break down because it's tangible. And your commercial landlords already know how to monetize this stuff with their tenants. What they need is help packaging it together into a single deal and not 500 different threads to chase that they don't have the operational capabilities of doing. And that's really where I think the in-building wireless market and just IoT in general faces huge challenges.
Yeah, no, that's true. So if you look at what potential technologies could affect this, have you had any thoughts on satellite and where that goes? And we have an interest in, understanding more about satellite here. What's your take on that? Does that something that, if we were able to work on satellite to mobile, that might get us closer to a solution that would fit every tenant?
Interesting. I mean, so we look at satellite and wideband type transmission technologies for certain rural use cases. Honestly, it's not something tenants have been asking us for, at least to my knowledge. I think the problem satellite faces is the headwinds and kind of the historical opinion on it from services like Sirius or the home internet via satellite has gotten a bad rap over the years, possibly because things outside the provider's control. But at the same time, you have the Tesla solution out there where clearly it's viable. I think the satellite to us is a different kind of pipe, right? And we're not plumbers. So whether it's satellite, whether it's 5G, whether it's private network, CBRS, whatever, I think we don't necessarily want to or need to care how the pipes work as long as the water flows. And I can definitely see in rural locations where there's specific demands for connectivity that can't be met by local providers, that could definitely be what makes a deal happen. And we do deal in assets in strange locations, or remote locations and what have you that are outside of major metros. So I can definitely envision that being a thing. But I think that's the mindset shift that has to happen, is that, commercial landlords don't care. They don't want to care beyond the extent of their liability, right? So for you to make your product sellable to them, you're bringing in solutions, not questions. Like, don't ask me to understand it. Tell me what it can do for me, and I'll tell you how we can monetize it. We can see if there's a deal here. Does that make sense?
One of the things that I try to talk to friends and colleagues in the wireless industry is that you've got to come, and you've been the one that kind of really put this in front of me at the show, is you've got to come with an all-in solution. You can't go and say, we sell cold cuts. You got to go down the street for bread, and somebody else has got to sell the mustard. You want to come to me with the full, ready to go sandwich, and that's what I'm looking for. And so, I try and on one of the panels that I did at the show, we tried to talk about that. Is that if you're in the business, you've got to come to a guy like you with a full service solution from start to finish, and that's not something that the industry has yet embraced. So I guess, what's your vision of what the solution is? What do things look like, 5 years down the road, let's say 2 years down the road, 5 years, 10 years down the road, for commercial real estate to be totally ingrained in the wireless mentality?
Sure. I think one area where I do see maybe some buds growing at least a little bit is the commoditization or the building of a marketplace, if you will, for leasing rooftops to wireless providers. That does seem like there are some models out there. There are some platforms where I can go and say, okay, I got 500 sites in these locations, these size roofs, these heights. Help me monetize that. That seems like somewhere where the connections are being made, and there are kind of market makers in there helping clear that market between cell phone data providers and commercial landlords or people that own buildings, right? So I think that might be the model. If that can be successful in getting sort of things happening on the ground by creating those connections and really being a successful platform or marketplace, that could be the way. I think that's really a good thing. Is we have all the products, there's just no marketplace where I can buy them, right? I literally have to go and kind of cold call every single component maker to figure out how to make it all come together. Whereas if there's a marketplace for turnkey solutions, then I can pick and choose and say, okay, I got this much capital, I need this much returns. Who wants to do business? And I think one of the plays will be technology, right? There are a lot of market makers in the real estate business that are selling data, selling services, and allowing folks to connect buyers and sellers. That might emerge, whether from a startup or a consolidation or existing player in the space. And then ultimately, I do think that as these things become standardized, it'll get a lot easier, right? So, we've seen some very successful CBRS rollouts, but the spectrum is relatively new. The marketplace is kind of all over the place. We're facing obviously the constraints around financing and IPOs and things like that. So we may see some more consolidation of startups kind of gobbling each other up and hoping to simplify it a little bit. So it'll happen. Whether it's a 2-year or a 5-year timeline, I lean more towards 5 years. Just a lot of headwinds to innovation right now due to the capital markets, due to the economy, broader macro factors. I think you can't ignore that when you're talking about these things. But at the same time, obviously, the people that are going to win need to be doing this now, right? For when the time comes. So I think some people are. I've heard some interesting proposals for people that are, as I said, on the leasing side or on actually connecting landlords with data providers. But I haven't seen that happening yet. There's been some consolidation of various companies that do in-building technologies and build outs and IoT. They're kind of getting involved in wireless. I'm not sure whether it's going to be the wireless side or the in-building side that kind of ends up on top. But once that connection's made, and I can go out and research turnkey solutions and execute on them, that's when we'll be able to deploy capital at scale. Yeah. So I'd say probably most closer to 5 years, just because of all that's involved there, right? You have a lot of companies, a lot of technologies jockeying for position. We're not sure, which provider's going to end up on top and have a standardized solution. Everyone promises you everything, but as we've said, we've tried to do this a few times, and kind of when we get beyond the vaporware, there's a lot of barriers to actual execution. But once people start doing it, the floodgates will open. It's just a matter of being there when the time comes to take advantage of that is the key right now. So I think it's all happening behind the scenes, but it is happening if that makes sense.
Got it. Yeah. Well, I'm always going to think of you as that sharp young guy in the business. So
I'll always be young compared to you, Rich. That's
until
true.
you get gray like I am, I'm always going to think that way. But thank you so much for doing this today. It was great seeing you at the show, and I appreciate the time. And again, hopefully we'll talk and meet in very near future.
Thank you, Rich. Take care.